Pleasure to be here today with our very special guest. There is a lot that we have to learn from her. Now, she is a pre-decision diagnostic advisor who is based in Trinidad and Tobago, and she's the founder of Hudson Alignment Studio. She specializes in helping leaders and teams realign behaviors, systems, and decision-making patterns that create healthier, higher performing work environments. With a career shaped by deep inquiry into human behavior, change, and performance, she is known for her reflective, insight-driven writing on leadership, engagement, and organizational culture. She brings over 2 decades of experience guiding individuals and organizations toward clarity, alignment, and sustainable growth. And I speak of our special guest today, Giselle Hudson. It's certainly a pleasure to have you here today, Giselle. Welcome.
Thank you, Alison.
Okay, awesome. Now to open our conversation, I want to ask you, Giselle, you observe teams closely and you're able to pick up on patterns long before they become visible to others. So in your position as a pre-decision diagnostic advisor, can you tell us about your work? What early signals can you tell, or are you able to tell a team that is starting to slip out of sync from your experience?
Yeah. The first thing I'd say is that there's an assumption that teams are in sync. I don't think that teams are readily in sync. I was thinking about, for example, like a car. If you buy a brand new car, everything is running perfectly at that time and in sync. Teams don't come fully loaded as a mechanical instrument or car would come. So you find that each part of the team is, it's comprising of different individuals, and each person has their own alignment issues, challenges that they have to address. And so the alignment starts individually and then it's integrated. So what happens though is when a team would be more in sync if each individual on that team understood themselves better, understood what they were bringing, what their agency is, what their area of expertise, their contribution. Of course, there's the assumption that there's clarity in direction, because that is essentially what would drive the collective productivity of the team.
Yeah.
And so, and then once that happens, then you would find that there's flow and there's synergy. So what I have observed would be where there's a lot of insularity, where there's a lot of silo kind of behavior. It could be intra-department, it could be inter-department, and it really depends. So, in looking at it, there's so many different, variables. But of course, in a situation like that, less questions, more assumptions, and people protecting themselves instead of contributing, people getting very territorial about rules. There's not that easy flow because there's also a lack of trust.
Yes.
So there's a lot that goes in. Of course, when a team is terribly out of sync, you would have a highly reactive team. Everything starts to feel urgent, people, not understanding. You have people sort of coming together and gossiping about, another person or another department. And so you feel a general kind of pressure, where everybody's polite, but they're not really telling you what is going on.
Yes, and that's really a very interesting way that you have shared, how all of this alignment as a team comes together. Interesting, and I like it. Now, let's hear from you further to lead into the second question. You have helped many leaders move from just assuming clarity to, identifying what constitutes as real, or being genuine in their approach. So I want to explore that from your experience, helping leaders to build clarity. What does real day-to-day clarity looks like inside of a team? I know you mentioned it before in the previous question, but you can expand. Yes.
That's okay. I was just on the phone actually to someone who I'd worked with, and I just reached out to them to see how they were going. And it's interesting because she said to me that, she's been reading a lot of the things that I have been posting. And one of the things that she realizes that she has to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, business in and of itself, the environment, the economy, we tend to think that speeding up is better. And day-to-day clarity means finding time to really slow it down. Slow it down. I take a lot of insight from the medical fraternity. A doctor, a good doctor, I should say, is a good diagnostician because he is asking tons of questions, tons of questions. It's not just taking it at face value. And so, and sometimes to the point where you yourselves just wonder, like, why is he still asking me this? Didn't he ask me this? But I think it's important to really understand what you're dealing with. And I would say, I was actually thinking about this as well. I would say that if you don't have it within yourself, you need to have a person, and I'm not advocating for me to be hired, but I'm talking about like someone that you can recognize who you might think, oh gosh, you're kind of stalling things, or we're trying to move quickly here. That person who tends to kind of give a little drag and say, wait, but have you considered, I think there's more value in that person than we give, other than just being a pain in the butt, we might just think that that person is just, gosh, they're keeping me back. But I think that it is so important to really understand. And I don't think that we always understand. And I do think that it's not why I'm suggesting the other person, it's not an isolated event, because when you're up close to something, you're not seeing it clearly.
Yes.
Right? If you're able to treat with yourself as in the third person, I saw this recently as a suggestion. So I'm just, putting it out there. But, it's like thinking, okay, you start to talk about yourself like, okay, Giselle is facing this, and what should she do? And then start writing along those lines. So you sort of self outside of self-examining self. You get a better perspective than being in it, because being in it, you have the emotion, you have sort of knowledge that you've done this before. I've seen people have that sort of, confidence where, well, we know exactly what to do here. And of course, that may not always be the case, because while it looks the same on the surface, it may not necessarily be the same. It may not have the same variables and components that you need to address. So, I think definitely, I would say the first thing, slow completely down, ask tons of questions, ask questions again. I think the time that you spend doing that,
Yes.
yeah, it will do wonders in terms of where you eventually get to, in terms of, I mean, I'm not suggesting you take months,
Yes.
but I am saying, take a proportionate amount of time depending on the size of the decision that needs to be made.
Yes.
How much is that decision going to cost?
Yes.
Or how much is a wrong decision going to cost?
Going to cost. Yes. And that's some really deep insight there, Giselle, and real food for thought, based on what you have shared. It's a lot of organizations avoid doing that because a lot of them tend to focus on speed. But here
Speed.
you are, encouraging them to think deeper than this, because it comes back to quality. So really deep food for thought there. No, decision making is one of the strongest indicators of leadership maturity. And you have seen the habits that make or break the execution. So when you look at how leaders make decisions, what habits consistently support execution?
Well, again, there's a tagline that I use, clarify before you amplify. And it is that habit of, clarification in your decision making. Sometimes, like if you think about a journalist, there's integrity in terms of reporting. Who said it? How good is the source, etc. I think it's important to, and like I said, because an organization is so exceedingly complex. I think in terms of the habits, I think you have good people around you, not yes men or women. You have good people around you who will challenge your thoughts, challenge direction. I'm not saying to be confrontational, it's different. And I'm not saying to be confrontational or to challenge for the sake of it. You could reduce ambiguity quickly. You create feedback loops. You make it safe for people to surface friction, because that's where you get the yes men and women, when you don't make it safe. When I spoke in a post about, the fear of humiliation. I think a lot of leaders fear looking stupid. So you think that you need to have all the answers, and I've seen time and time again where, while we might look at an Oprah or Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, or a Mark Zuckerberg, there's always another person. There's always a wingman. There's always somebody else there. They are not doing it, or wingmen and women. There's not that where I invented fire, and it's just me. I did it my way. It's seductive, it's sexy, but it's not really how things work. People tend to have, it's where somebody understands that I don't have all the answers. And as the leader, I'm not expected to always have all the answers. And I think that I also need to be open-minded enough to welcome other perspectives. And then when I have everything, then I could distill and decide in the context of the whole, which is the best way forward for the organization.
Excellent, Giselle, excellence. All right, now you have shared so much advice there for leaders. So we can hear your experience. You have worked in human-centered leadership, and this helps to bring a practical lens to concepts that people often treat as abstract. Now, in your work with human-centered leadership, how do you see inclusiveness and accessibility showing up when you think about everyday operations? How do you see inclusiveness and accessibility actually showing up?
When there's a leader who can discern and understand, you'll always have, I guess, in a group, somebody who's talking a lot and contributing a lot, and that's okay. Sometimes, people scoff and call these people like know-it-alls. They are know-it-alls, and then there are people who it needs to be teased out. Quieter personalities. Just I had lunch with a teacher years ago, and actually after that she died like a couple of months later. But it was interesting because she told me things about me in school that I didn't realize that she had that information. She said, your mother spoke to me and she told me, about, how things have evolved up to now. And so she told me, keep an eye on you. And, and she developed certain things. And then eventually she said to me at the lunch, she said, the student has become the teacher and the teacher has become the student, which was one of the greatest compliments. But my point is that I think dealing with humans, I always say it's messy.
Yes.
It's beautifully messy, right? We've all been, and just to quote, fearfully and wonderfully made. And I think that we have a contribution. I think everyone is predisposed to a particular way in which they do things and in how they see the world. So as a leader, you can't have a worldview that's your own. And you have to sort of get from people, not just hear the ones who are loud or contributing, I should say, because I don't want to suggest that being loud means that it's a negative thing. But where everyone can feel safe, where everyone knows that even if you don't use the idea, or even if right now what I'm suggesting may not be practical, but that they're not dismissed. It shuts people down, right? Maybe sometimes not intentionally, but you might inadvertently put a stopcock on somebody who can contribute beneficially down the road, but because of how you handle that particular situation. So it's really valuing people. And I will say that many organizations talk about valuing people and they don't. And it's because, like I said, we are beautifully messy. So it's like they really literally want you to sort of just show up, do the work, not too much fuss, not too much friction.
Yes.
Let me do my work.
Yes.
I don't think there's enough understanding. And it's not even like, mom and pop shops or smaller businesses. I think everyone. It's like employees bother them, right? They are bothered. And it shouldn't be because, but it takes understanding and perhaps or isolating and getting someone who can do that for you in the organization, because you may not necessarily be wired,
right,
to deal with those personalities, but I'm saying that get someone on board to deal with, with personalities, if that is an issue, because we all, I think, there's I think it was, what was the book? I think it was Acres of Diamonds, but that's just it. I think every organization is sitting on acres of diamonds. It's just unmined potential in employees, but you don't know. So somebody who has a rude or disapproving facade, that person is dismissed. You don't know what is lying in that acreage. You don't know what's there. And sometimes people become a particular way and are defensive or whatever it is because of issues that, once you kind of get through all of that, you recognize that they have something really, really valuable to contribute. And where does that happen? When people genuinely feel that you're interested in them, that's when people open up.
That's some really, really strong advice there, Giselle. Really great advice right there. And, let's continue to talk about helping some of these organizations. I really do hope that persons will tune in and actually learn from these generous tips that I shared. Now, when we think about pressure, pressure reveals a whole lot as it relates to team culture. So I'd love to hear what you have observed. So when teams are under pressure, what behaviors help stabilize execution and which ones tend to disrupt it?
A leader who I think is not emotionally is not able to emotionally regulate themselves, obviously that would sort of be contagious, right, within the team. So I think that there needs to be, I'm not saying to be flatline, I'm not necessarily saying to be calm, I'm not saying to be dispassionate, but you sort of reduce chaos, in the Caribbean in particular, we say, well, we like bacchanal, or we like stuff, but you don't want to feed unnecessarily, you don't want to feed into that narrative. You want to give that sense of, we are doing this. Yes, this is a rocky period, but these are the things that we need to do to get through this. It's like how we all evolved during COVID. It was like you sort of, if you think about that experience, and there's a term that I came across recently called the fog of war, and it's that uncertainty in war where you don't know all the things that you're dealing with, but that's life. I think that, sometimes my mom used to have a meltdown every time an appliance broke, and I guess, she, from, her background and all of that, she'd be like, gosh, this broke. And you go like, okay, but, you could just buy a new one, right? But, culturally and her environment and everything, it was kind of end of the world to her, and I just think that we need to embrace that more. Uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know something COVID-like. We don't know. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen in the world. There's always something, right? We tend to go like, oh, there's a recession, as if it doesn't happen. Uncertainty. I think that being comfortable with that uncertainty, but not to the point where you are dissolving or sort of starting to project what is happening. Having said that, again, as a leader, and I often think about this, great players in the music industry, in the sport industry, have coaches. And they're people that they can confide in and talk to, who will help them through their pressure points, their uncertainty. And I don't know, again, that business leaders do that. So in terms of, stabilizing execution, I think you also need a support system. And this can't be ad hoc. This has to be chosen carefully. But I think that, there needs to be some of that vulnerability and that openness to help you, because, it's like if you're taking care of a sick person, caregivers need to be supportive. If you're a leader, you're caring for a number of people, depending on where you are, it's either a small team or a large organization. You have to take care of yourself, and you need that support. So I think it's twofold in terms of managing that. And I think the under pressure part is more common than not. You are always under pressure, under pressure from the board to perform, under pressure from, from in terms of departments and what needs to happen. It's pressure.
Yeah. That's unavoidable. It's
unavoidable.
Yes. All right. So you have really shared a lot, and we are basically at the end, but I'm going to ask, what final tips do you want to impart to, leaders, founders, organizations in general? What final tips do you want to impart? You have really shared some great insights, and it's a lot to think about, and, tell persons how they can connect with you so that they can gain from your expertise.
Well, in terms of connecting with me, very easy. It's my name, GiselleHudson.com. You can subscribe or not to the Strategic Alignment Journal, but I post every single day there. So even if you just hop over there occasionally, so that's GISELLEHUDSON.com. And there's all that information there about the diagnostic work. My work is very pattern driven. So generally, I have sort of uncovered four basic patterns, and that is there's plateau, like if someone, they're not moving. There's friction if you have a recurring problem. There's identity, where maybe the business is not what you expected it to be, or there's something there that's not fully aligning. And then there's opportunity, when you want to consider a new venture or a different part of business or whatever. In terms of tips, and I think that making sense of things, it's a skill that if you don't necessarily have it, you're not necessarily going to become an expert, but you begin to really ask why. You can do it by just asking why, and then asking why again, and asking why again and again. Probably 7 whys deep, you can start to uncover what might be happening. Don't just go to the first thing. We have a thing that sales are down, more marketing. That's the kind of thinking. Or different sales team or sales training. None of those things might be contributing. It might be something else.
Yes.
So it's important to know and understand that, especially if I think this is key. If you have a recurring problem and that has been going on for a while, and you have thrown quite a few dollar investments behind that problem, and you haven't solved it as yet, that's it. You should call me. But more importantly, you need something is happening. I think
Yes.
that is the red flag.
Yes. Yes.
You may be closer to solving, but like I said, you would spend less money trying to figure it out, upfront, rather than trying to go with what you think is a confident trend, and yes, this will work. Most times it's not going to work, whatever anybody is telling you that this, because again, uncertainty. When I was much younger, clients asked me to guarantee that this would happen, and there's no guarantee there's no guarantee. Anybody who tells you that there's a guarantee, they're lying, because there are too many variables that are out of the advisor or consultant's control to have a guarantee, because that means that you are going to do exactly everything, and then that also says that everything I say to do and you do it exactly like that, it's going to happen. Life doesn't work like that. We can get closer. We can approach it in a structural way, in a way that makes sense. But if we think that there's some magic bullet and it's 3 easy steps and you're financially independent, no, it's not gonna happen like that.
Excellent. And I want to thank you so much, Giselle, for these final tips that you have shared. And I'm happy that you're able to share also how persons can connect with you, because I'm certain that a lot more persons want to connect with you for this expertise. You have mentioned so many ways in which you're able to assist. And please remember, those who are listening, GiselleHudson.com. Please connect with her. She's excellent at helping leaders, teams, you name it. And I want to say thank you so much again, Giselle. We are basically out of time. But thank you so much. This has been great. This has been great. And I want to say thank you.